Some of us are a little low energy because we've been in the pool. Others are low energy because I don't really know what you guys have been doing, but I figured it might be a little helpful to get the blood flowing.
Guys, it's a pearl pencil.
Oh.
That's mine, that doesn't count.
No, that counts. That counts.
I got my bottle back. 3 items.
Well, you guys think I should leave you there the whole time?
Yeah! No.
No.
I don't want to be on the girls' side. They have
cooties. Uh-oh. I don't think I can deal with it. There we go. All right.
You get points.
He's watching you. He's watching you.
She was
I'm watching you now.
All right. Now that I've scratched that itch up, so today what I'm going to talk about is a little, it's kind of a hodgepodge of ideas, but it all makes sense as I'll go through it. I'm going to talk about like the preparation, particularly from my side on what it takes to be a missionary, and then I'll talk a little bit on just how different it looks. But I'll also talk about how it looks like to be called, specifically in my life, and just some other things. But I figured it'd be appropriate before we get started to read the Great Commission, which is Matthew 28:19 through 20. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the ends of the earth. This was one of the last things that Jesus said to his disciples before he left. And this was what he had been preparing them for throughout his entire ministry. Jesus' ministry wasn't going to be eternal. We were going to have to take over the mantle and start the church. Now, you guys, how many of you guys think that missionaries are these great spiritual warriors who never sin? Can I see a show of hands? No? Who thinks of them as really righteous people who never struggled with much? Nothing? Well, I'm still going to talk about it anyways. That's good though, because that's a misconception. But if we look to Scripture, I'll have a few stories I'd like to share. And the first story I'd like to talk about is the story of Moses. How many of you guys think of Moses as a really great spiritual leader? Do you think he was always like that? All right. In fact, when you first start reading Exodus, we kind of get a very different picture of Moses than a great spiritual leader. In fact, the first story that we get of Moses as an adult, he murders someone out of anger. And that's not a really good leadership quality, is it? He can't control his anger. He goes up and he kills an Egyptian. But after he kills someone, he doesn't just stand his ground out of great courage. No, Moses was a coward. As soon as someone found out, he fled. He ran really far to the east to a place called Midian. And there he found a wife, and he lived in hiding for 40 years. And up to this point, not only has he been a murderer, not only was he a coward, but he also was breaking Jewish law. Then we get to the story of the burning bush. And I don't know if you guys have read the story of the burning bush recently, but God didn't just appear to Moses and Moses listened right away. I counted 4 times Moses said, "I can't do this. I don't know why you're talking to me." So when God appeared to Moses in the burning bush, he didn't oh wow, God's appeared to me. God's talking to me. Clearly this is going to be a great thing. Moses Moses responded like, "Yeah, I think you got the wrong guy. You can't work through me." And yet, despite being a murderer, despite being a lawbreaker, despite having no faith, even when God showed himself to him, despite his cowardice, Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt through the power of God. And then this other picture here is that's Paul. And I think we're all really familiar with Paul. He was one of the first missionaries after Christ left. But he wasn't always like that, was he? He straight up killed Christians. He would persecute Christians. He would order Jewish leaders to stone Christians. And yet, on his way to Damascus, God visited him in a light, and Paul believed, and he was sent on, and he became not only a really great missionary and a great church planter, but he also wrote almost all of the New Testament outside of the Gospels. So, with that in mind, you guys remember a lot of my testimony from yesterday. And what I'm trying to paint here is, by no means am I perfect. And we'll start with kind of the way that Camp Jubilee influenced my call to pursuing missions work. It was Camp Jubilee that was probably my first big exposure, or at least a consistent exposure to missionary work every year. Because missionary hour has always been around, at least since I've been a camper. And it was missionary hour at Camp Jubilee that started to get me thinking, like, I wonder if that's in my future. I wonder if that's what I want to do. But it wasn't just that. There were also a lot of missionary stories that my mom read me one year. We started a new school curriculum, and in the curriculum, all of us kids together had to read through some missionary stories together. And so I was introduced to Dwight L. Moody and his work in Africa. I was introduced to Gladys Aylward and what she did in China. And then I was introduced to Nate Saint. Now, Nate Saint's an important character in this journey that we're about to go on. I won't tell you much about him yet, other than the fact that he was a missionary pilot. Now, after those encounters with thinking about being a missionary, it kind of just left my mind. My brother joined the Marines, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I'm going to join the military. I'm going to be in Air Force. I'm going to go into the Air Force. I'm going to be just like my older brother. But there weren't many JROTC programs that accepted homeschooled kids. Oh, I don't know what I did there. There weren't many JROTC programs that accepted homeschooled kids, and I was homeschooled my whole life, pretty much. So eventually, we heard about this new program called the Civil Air Patrol. And when I joined the Civil Air Patrol, the luster for serving in the military quickly faded. But the longer I stayed in the program, the more I grew, and the more I realized, like, maybe being a pilot is something I could do through here. So, as I stayed in the program, eventually, I read the story of Nate Saint again. This is around the time I had gone up in a plane with the Civil Air Patrol, and I read through this story, and my takeaway wasn't, man, this is a great missionary. I want to be just like him. I read this story, and I was like, I am going to fly for Delta. This seems really easy. But then I heard about the Wings program through Civil Air Patrol, and the Wings program is a neat opportunity where they're like, we're going to pay for your private pilot's license if you show that you're going to put in the effort, if you show that you'd be a good candidate. So I started putting in the work. I started flying a little. I started flying a little more, and within just my first 3 flights, they reached out to me and they said, we want you. We want you to be in the Wings program. We see great potential. And it was weird because I was accepted early. Usually you have to go through your solo flight first. And what a solo flight is the first time you fly alone in the airplane without an instructor. But they saw that I was consistent. They saw that I was actually trying to be a pilot, and they were like, well, actually, I think this guy's going to be a good fit. And this was just one of the first blessings that God bestowed on me through this time. And this just so happened to be right after that year at Camp Jubilee that I talked about yesterday. When I got accepted early, I got to thinking, maybe there's something more that God wants here. There's been a lot of providence up to this point, and doors weren't just opened, things weren't just paved in the way. These opportunities were just dropped on my lap in a way that generally doesn't work out. So I went back and I read a different story about Nate Saint. I read The Jungle Pilot, which was written by his son. And after reading through his story and about how he and Bill Elliott went down to Ecuador and they tried really hard to reach this cannibalistic nation, this cannibalistic tribe, my heart began to change. My heart began to be moved by this story. And by the time I was done reading the story, I realized, no, I don't want to fly for Delta. There's not really anything in that. I think that I would rather fly for the Lord. And so now you might be wondering, what is a missionary pilot? A missionary pilot is kind of a really necessary thing in a lot of places of the world. In a lot of places of the world, there's not good roads. And it's not just that there isn't good roads. You can't really make good roads, whether there's too big mountains in the way or maybe the jungle's too thick and would cause you would just have to cut down too many trees. Sometimes it's just because it's really swampy and the roads would fall apart too quickly. What a missionary pilot is the transport that makes what would be a 2-week walk through the jungle a 5-minute flight. It is said that in the jungles of South Africa, every 2 weeks that you walk, it only takes 5 minutes in the plane. And you can see how if you have someone flying into a tribe that is really far out, away from any hospital, a 5-minute flight could be the difference between life and death. And that's a big part of what a missionary pilot does. They fly into these remote places where we can't drive, where we can't really trek into easily, and they drop off supplies, or they bring people to hospitals, or in something that I'll show you tomorrow, sometimes they drop off a newly translated Bible for the first time. So this is what I wanted to do. And so I began looking into schools, because after reading the story of Nate Saint and after looking into missionary organizations, I realized that in order to do what I wanted to do, I was going to need an education. The main reason I wanted an education was just because I desired to grow in my knowledge of the Word and how to handle it properly, but it was also required for almost every single missionary pilot organization, including Missionary Aviation Fellowship and Ethnos 360, which is a bigger organization than just aviation. I started my search in Wisconsin because I didn't want to stay in Georgia, quite frankly, and I was missing Austin. I was missing my family here, so I was like, I'm going to go to Maranatha Baptist University. And then I was looking into Pensacola Christian College, and I was like, actually, the tuition at Pensacola Christian College is really, really low. If I go there for all 4 years, I could afford getting my private pilot's license alongside of it. And then I found out something that completely changed my mind entirely. Austin was going to go to Bob Jones University. And I was looking into Bob Jones, and they had a missionary aviation program. A missionary aviation program that got shut down in 2020. So when I, after figuring all that out, I sat and I was looking at my options. I was like, well, Maranatha, I could go get my private pilot's license through them. I could go and down this path with them, but they aren't really specialized in missionary aviation. And I was thinking, Pensacola Christian College is really affordable, but it's not really close to any flight schools. And Austin is really tempting down in Bob Jones, but the program that I wanted is no longer there. And so I looked into a few other schools. Liberty University is known for their missionary pilot training. Laterno University is known for theirs as well, and there's a couple others. But the more research I did into them, none of them felt right. They were all more focused on getting you into an airlines, but giving you a Bible degree alongside of it. And so, really defeated in my search, I came home one day from work, and my dad was sitting on the couch, and he was like, "Hey, Caleb, I have got this school that I think you should check out. And the main reason I want you to check it out is because it's in Washington. I've always wanted to go to Washington. And so if you go to school out in Washington, I'd have an excuse to finally go there and watch a Seahawks game." So I looked into it, and not only was it still a school, but it was also exactly what I was looking for. It was the Moody Aviation is built specifically around the concept of training missionary pilots. They've been doing this for 78 years now, and they're a small branch of Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. Although, if you go to our campus, we are absolutely nothing like our counterparts in Chicago. The campus is very different. It's actually non-existent. We have 2 hangars on a runway. So I started going to Moody Aviation. That was it. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I sent out applications. I got accepted everywhere that I wanted to be. But when the Bob Jones University letter came in first, I looked at it and said, "I'm sorry, Austin, but this isn't where God's calling me to go." So that's where I've been for the last 2 years. And that's why I wasn't able to be here last year. The first year of training looked like a lot of biblical education. I spent some time reading through the Old Testament and understanding it in its entirety. The second semester was the New Testament. We were able to learn about the church and the doctrines inside it. And that was when I had my first opportunity to write a sermon, was that first year of school. And the reason why the first year looks like this is because of a couple reasons. Freshmen tend to not know how intense college is. And so there were many nights where I was staying up until 2 a.m. biking to Idaho and back. They wanted to implement good study habits from the start, but they also wanted us to have a good sense of community by the end of the program, because after the first year the program gets really intense and it's hard to make new friends. My second year is what I just finished, and it was a bit weird for me. Normally it looks like going through maintenance and then and things like that, but I had this unique opportunity because I already have my private pilot's license to flip the program around. And so I had this weird gap semester where I wasn't doing much, and then this last semester I started flying again with the school. Now, my future with the school here is I'm going to finish flight. It's going to take me 2 more years of flight training before I've got everything that I need to go out onto the field. And then I have 2 years of maintenance work to do. And then after that, for reasons that you can talk to me about if you ever get the chance, I may pursue a seminary degree after that. Now we get into some fun stuff that most missionaries are going to have to do, and that is choosing a missionary organization, because there are a lot. And they all have different models of how they go and reach places. They all have different doctrines that you have to look through and ask, is that what I align with? And then you also have to ask yourself, are their doctrinal differences so different from yours that it's just not an option? Or is it something that shouldn't affect you as a missionary? And you can say, well, we don't agree in this point, but I think we can still work together. So the three organizations you see here is AIM Air, Send North, and Ethnos 360. These are the three organizations that my fiance and I have been talking about a lot. Ethnos 360 is a really unique program, and I won't go into too much about them, but all three of these allow Kayla and I to do exactly what we would like to do on the field. And just so that you guys are aware, Send North works out of Alaska, and Alaska is a really dark place in the world, in the States right now, relatively unreached. Something that I don't think many of us realize is there's not much for road systems there, and a lot of the cities and towns there, the only way to get out and away is to rent like a little Cessna and go to somewhere like Anchorage, where there's an actual city. And because of the darkness there, literally, when the sun doesn't shine for a while, and because of some of the spiritual warfare going on with how much depression is going on from the lack of sunlight, there's not a lot of hope there. In fact, most families there are severely alcoholic, making their kids born with a lot of mental illnesses. So there's a great need for special needs kids there. And that's why Kayla and I are kind of drawn there. We feel like we could be used there. We've both had a heart for special needs people, and we would like to serve them in that way. But the other thing that's unique about Send North is that because of the unique situation of Alaska, I wouldn't just be a pilot who flies in supplies or flies missionaries and people in tribes to a hospital. I would be sent as a pastor who just so happens to have a plane. And that sounds quite the neat opportunity. But after going through all the process of picking an organization and figuring out which one aligns with you best, there's some other things that you have to do. And it looks different from person to person. Like if I go with AIM Air or Ethnos 360, I would have another 2 years where I'm learning a new language and I'm learning a new culture and what is normal there. Because sometimes the culture shock for an American is really off-putting, and it makes a lot of missionaries return. But sometimes these language schools and culture schools isn't a 2-year setback, but it's actually a neat opportunity to go and immerse yourself in a new culture for a few years before you start becoming a missionary. And personally, I think that's a better model, because the best way to learn a new culture is by living in that culture. But the other setback that not many people think about is fundraising, which tends to take a few years for most people. And it can be a little daunting. In fact, most people I know lately don't really feel comfortable asking for money around places. But this is specifically what it looks like for me, and I'm still learning how it looks like for other people. Some people don't have to go through a language school. Some people go to Alaska, where there's a great need for pastors, and they just speak English there. Other people don't have to go to school, and sometimes you don't even have to join a missionary organization. There's nothing stopping you from going to China, learning Chinese, getting into that culture and starting a church on your own. Being a missionary doesn't have to be a super formal thing where you look through all these organizations. There's a lot of diversity in missions. In fact, a missionary isn't necessarily just a pastor or a Bible translator or a Sunday school teacher. And yes, we have our doctors who are missionaries. Yes, we have our teachers who are missionaries. And yes, Bible translation is a really big need in a lot of places. But that's not all that there is. In fact, I think that there's a pretty big misconception with missionary work, where we just think of this one little family left alone in a village, and they are there starting a church, and they have a church plant, and they run it as a family, and they learn the language, and that's it. That's missionary life. And for some, that's what it is. And for some, that's what they want to do. But some people start a business, and that's what they do as a missionary. Some people start a cafe just down the street, and they have Bible verses everywhere, or when it's slow, they try to start up conversations. In fact, I heard a really unique story of a missionary recently. He wanted to go to Uganda. In Uganda, they're known for this great big orchestra there. And so he wanted to go to Uganda, and he wanted to be an instrument repairman, because he figured if the Ugandan orchestra is there, surely there's going to be people who need repaired for instruments. When he got there, he realized that the Ugandan orchestra was made up entirely of Europeans, and none of them stayed in Uganda. They would all fly back to Europe after the show was over. And so when he got there and he started his instrument repairing shop, he didn't get any business. And so he was lost. He didn't know what to do. He knew God called him here. He knew that God wanted him in Uganda, but he wasn't able to serve in the capacity that he wanted. And the strangest thing happened. He became the coach for the paraplegic basketball team in his area. And if you're not aware, paraplegic basketball is it's basketball in wheelchairs because they can't walk, essentially. But that's not the only unique story. There's also filmmaking. Someone I go to school with, his name is Colin Rupp. His father makes movies, and he's able to put the Christian message into them. Sometimes we need engineers to go to Africa and dig wells. And JARS, which is another missionary organization, really needs computer techs, because that's a really easy way to get into the Middle East, where we can't really go in publicly. But that's just some ideas. But how can you prepare? How you prepare looks very different, again, for everyone. So the questions that you want to ask is, how do you want to serve? Do you want to start a cafe? Do you want to be an instrument repairman somewhere that actually has an orchestra that doesn't leave town? And then you have to ask yourself, with the way that you want to serve, does it require school? Do you need to go to college? Do you need to learn a language? And then ask yourself, do you want to do that with an organization, or do you want to go to that country alone? But starting now, what can you do? The short-term mission trips are a great way to start to see, is missionary life what's for me? Although I should put a warning here that mission trips are often formulated around the people going, and they're formulated in a way to make you feel like you're making a big impact, which isn't problematic. But what it can do is it can cause an unrealistic expectation of every single day as a missionary is going to be, you're going to feel like you did something great. But sometimes as a missionary, it's just a normal day, and you didn't really accomplish anything great. And a lot of missionaries go out and come back because they're like, it didn't feel like it was the short-term mission trip. We didn't feel like we were making an impact every day. But I should say that's the only real negative of a short-term missions trip, because it can also just spring a heart for missions. It can spring a heart for a people. It can spring a heart for a career in missions that you want to do. And I have a very short story with that. Just recently, my fiance went to Mexico on a missions trip. She always wanted to be a missionary. She always wanted to be a teacher, but she had the opportunity to go to Mexico for a week and serve at a missionary school. And this missionary school is run and operated completely by Christians to provide an education in the area and also to be an outreach to the kids. And it was there that she realized that not only did she love being a teacher, but that missions work was exactly what she wanted to do. She didn't just want to be a teacher in a school. God was very clearly calling her to be a missionary through teaching. But not only that, while she was there, she had the opportunity to work with some special needs kids. And that's what started her heart up. She was for special needs in missions. While she was there, she had a lot of conversations with the teachers, and she realized that one of the greatest needs overseas is not just a teacher, but a teacher willing to work with special needs kids. Not many people overseas know how to deal with them, and they're kind of just not dealt with, or they're treated as outsiders. And so Kayla saw that, and she was given a new heart, not only to be a teacher, but to also work with kids with special needs. But that's not the only thing you should be doing right now. You should also know the word well, because how can you be a missionary if you don't know what the Bible says? How can you be a missionary if you don't know what Jesus has done for you? And that is going to be my last thing. That leads into my last point here. Not only should you start with knowing your word, but you should start your mission work at home. Because if you can't be a missionary at home, it's going to be hard for you to be a missionary overseas. Going overseas doesn't make being a missionary any easier. So start an outreach. Be open with your faith. Find ways that you can be a missionary here. Because that's another thing about missionaries. They don't all go overseas. You can be a missionary in your backyard, because in our backyards there's a lot of people who need to be saved. There's a lot of people in your life who don't know Christ. And I bet we have family members even that don't know Christ. So that's my challenge for you today. If you want to be a missionary, if you're thinking about being a missionary, or even if you're not thinking about being a missionary, we're all called to spread the word we're all called to spread the gospel. We're all called to spread Jesus. So start in your backyard. Don't wait until it's too late. And that's all I've got for you.